But 2 days into my, arrival here, I journeyed off on the campus, and it's a big campus for an 8-year-old, and I was in Longview Cottage. I was down there with Miss Dowdy, and I believe there were 10 children, 10 kids in the cottage. There were 6 girls, and you probably know some of the names, Carla and Faye Jones, and there was a female by the name of Lynn. She was a tall redhead. I can't remember her last name. And Lynn, who? I think so. And Linda Allman, and then there were some boys, Buddha, you guys probably remember that name, Tom Borchard and Robert McCricker. But anyhow, I journeyed off across the campus, didn't know where I was going. And I got on the far side here, probably up around English or somewhere, but I ran into this kid that was about my age. And we played, you know how kids are going to do, we just played for a while, and time passed, and next thing you know, the bell rings. Well, I didn't know what the bell meant. No one told me what it was, It was time to go home to get ready for supper. So I didn't know where to go. And he said, well, where do you live? And I said, well, I live in the big house with the swing out in front of it. So he knew right away it was Longview Cottage. And he walked me back all the way down to the cottage. And we've been friends ever since that time. We've been best of friends. And that person is Evans Halstead. He's here somewhere out in the audience. There he is, back in the back. Evans Halstead. And we used to talk about that story long ago. But after meeting Evans, I got to know his family, Mr. and Mrs. Halstead, and they always welcomed me into their house. Mr. Halstead was, we all know Mr. Halstead. He's a tall man for an 8-year-old, deep voice, intimidating guy. And he would later go on to coach me in baseball and basketball and whatnot, great teacher. But the thing that I remember most about Mr. Halstead and what I really admired, there were 2 things. He would always, no matter what you did or where you were, he would do one thing that was very impressive for an 8-year-old and for any kid. And that is, he would always come down to eye level and talk to you. And as you grew, it seemed like he would, he would come up to that level. And he didn't talk to you though, he talked with you. And that's what made it different. And, but there's one thing that I should say, about Mr. Halstead, one other thing, and that is, I only heard him say one foul word. The whole time I was here, one foul word, and that was crud. That is it. So that's great, right? And that was, so for me, that was what I would consider one of the many best of times for me here. Now, one of the worst of times was, it was in the summer, and I was around 10, 11 years old, and a lot of you folks remember when we used to have a basketball camp here. And in the gym, it was a week long, and we would have a special guest come in. There may be a professional basketball player or some local, someone would come in. But anyhow, Mr. Graham was in charge of activities at that time. And I remember it was maybe in the middle of the week, and I loved going to the swimming pool, but I didn't really feel like working that particular day. Coming in the gym, and it was hot and sweaty. I didn't want to do all that stuff. So at 9 or 10 years old, I go to Mr. Graham and say, Mr. Graham, I got a cold. I'm not going to be able to make it to the camp today. He said, well, that's fine, son. He said, but I don't want to see you up at that swimming pool this evening. So I said, well, that's fine, Mr. Graham. I'm going to go home and get into bed, go to the cottage. Well, if most of you remember Mr. Graham, he had the house over on Red Lane, I think where Ron Hunt lives. And he had a Pinto, old green Pinto, that I could always tell if he was at home or not, because I'd look over there and see that Pinto parked in the driveway. So at about 6 o'clock, the pool would open up, and it was just killing me. I wanted to go to the pool, but I wasn't about to go. I just held off. I said, I'll just wait, And I kept looking out to see if that old Pinto was over there. Well, it stayed over there. Finally, I got up enough guts to say, you know what, I'm going. He's not coming over here. There's no way. He's at home, right? So I get up there to the pool. It's crowded with a bunch of people, and Mr. Gillick was the lifeguard. And I was in this swim. I wasn't that great of a swimmer, but I stayed close to the side. And every now and then I would look up and look over there. He's still there. That car was still there. So, you know, it went on for a while, and I finally got complacent. You know, I just felt comfortable. He's not coming over here. So lo and behold, I look up, and guess what? That car is gone, and I'm starting to panic. So I started to panic, and a few minutes go by, you know, I'm swimming, looking up, and all of a sudden, guess who comes walking through the gate? Mr. Graham. So I ducked down beside the pool, you know, and I'm hanging in there thinking I'll just stay low. He won't see me because there's a bunch of kids in this thing, you know, and I'm going to get to the other end and get out. Didn't work that way. I finally had to come up for air, and he looked over there and saw me in the pool, and he said, "Dave, hold the pool for a minute." And he said, "Pelias, come with me." Well, I started crying before I even got out of the water, because I knew what was going to happen, right? And the thing about it was, I knew from some of the older guys, I mean, I'm sure Stan Moore and Walton and those guys and people like Rooster Newton, they could tell you, you don't lie to Mr. Graham. You just don't lie. He's got a way of figuring things out. But anyhow, I lied to him. He brought me down here to the gym. He used to have his office down in the bottom of the gym down there. Like I said, I was crying the whole way, and wet trunks and all, and he said, "Son, you lied to me. You know how I feel about lying." Well, just crying and sobbing. I thought it would gain me some favors with him. But the first thing that I would mention is the bell. I found out what the bell was for, and that thing was just a way of signaling to everybody. We all knew what it was, what it meant. When it was time to go eat, when it was time to come in the evenings, something, when it was time to come to chapel or whatever. The other thing was just in the cafeteria. You know, I hated, like most of us, to see that building go. There was so many memories there. When it was gone, I realized what it meant. You know, all the friendships. James Menifee, I see him out there. I could see this guy hanging around in there. We used to have dances and things like that, and he was a guy that, you know, the girls were after to dance. James was just a dancer. He was. But, you know, that memory was lost. And just passing that, when I first came here, we used to all sit at the table and pass the dishes around, and you, from the oldest to the youngest, and if it got back to you and there was something on it, then you got it. It kind of reminded me of the Darlings on Andy Griffith's show that time. You know, they passed the plate around, but it was like that. And of course, then chapel. And chapel was very important. The Baptist Children's Home, Virginia Baptist Children's Home. That's what it was all about, was the ministry. And we used to come in here, from what I remember, on Wednesday evenings, and we'd all get together. And there was the Bailey Bunch. For those that weren't here at that time, that was the Mr. and Miss Bailey, and they had youth choir. And Stan Moore was one of the singers. And I've got an album, photo album. He's there, and his sister, and my sister was in it, and you know, so they sang some really sweet gospel hymns. That, you know, was one of those things that would kind of get you right here, you know. And then there was some of the tougher times, is picking up hay. Now, when I got a little bit older, going out in the hay fields and picking up hay, it wasn't all that much fun. And Bo's shaking his head. He, you know, I'm sure can tell you a thing or two about it. But it was fun when I got older, because, you know, we got the swimming pool to ourselves. You know, that was great. You know, you come back in, there'd be 20-some kids going out on that trailer packed from front to rear. You'd get over there, and Russell and Roy Yopp would have you, you know, unload over in the barn as hot as could be. And then we got the swimming pool in the evening. So that was really nice. And then there was the one thing that I admired these guys. There was, well, the coaches, Mr. Halstead and Mr. Graham, and Walton and Stan. Stan didn't play, but there was Bobby Ferguson and Mike Huffman. These guys, championship basketball teams. The home used to produce some really great athletes. You know, and I used to, when I was a kid, want to wear that uniform. And lo and behold, when I get to that age, guess what? They didn't have a team anymore. But hey, it was nice to look at the banners that these guys had won, you know, and to try to follow in their shoes. And they would come back after they left the home and play basketball with us and kind of bring the younger ones up. You know, I remember one day I was down here, and I wasn't supposed to be in the gym. And those guys, the older guys, were playing, and I walked through the door and got out on the court, and it was like a team of horses hit me. I don't know who it was, but it rolled me across the court, and I realized it wasn't my place to be in there. I wasn't old enough. So that was a lesson learned there. And then there's the Ms. Motley's store across the way over there. I'm sure, yeah, I see some heads shaking over that one. That was a nice little place to go get you most honest people, anyhow, would go and get things. I know a couple of folks that kind of went in there and no cash, no money in pocket. But first, I know what the trick was. See, I saw a couple of these guys would go in and sweet talk Miss Motley. She was probably 120, you know. And they'd go in and sweet talk her and sneak stuff out and put it, you know, on the side of the building, and then they'd come back across there with armloads of things and try to sell it to other people. Miss Motley, and then there was a gym store across the way. I used to hate walking through that cow pasture to get over there. I was scared to death of the cows. And I was scared to death of those things. But we walk over there, and in those woods now, there's all homes over there. But as a child, there were, you know, trails that went through there, and it was like, man, you were in a different world when you walked through those woods. And clubhouses and all kinds of things that happened over in those woods there. And some of the older guys, I'm sure some of the older guys had some stories that they could tell you too. But and then there was throwback tackle out in front of Crowder and Boys Memorial, where we would, it was a football game, and there's another name for it, modern day name. I won't mention that one, but what the scoop was, for those who don't know, is there was a big hill over there where the pavilion is now, and there were two buildings up in front, and the goal was to try, one person would stand at the top of the hill and toss the ball over their back, and then whoever touched the ball had to try to run the gamut to get to the top. Well, there was probably 20 other people waiting to just take your head off if you touched that ball. So that was throwback tackle. It made us pretty tough. I know of a few guys that walked away with some scars on their heads and whatnot. They're okay. And then there's fishing down at the pond. I used to love going down there as a child. My first pole was a bamboo rod, and I think I got it out of the activities closet here. Went down, that thing must have reached from here to that wall for me. And but it was a lot of fun. And again, the cows was one of the things I worried about, because there was that dam right there, and you know, I was probably 10 years old, so the dam was, you know, that way up ahead above me, and the kids used to, some of the kids would say, "Oh, you got to be careful, those cows will stampede." I didn't know what it was, but it was kind of scary when you would hear the cattle come off the hill there and the dust was flying. So I was always looking over my shoulder, wondering when I was going to get trampled. It never happened. But and then there's sleigh riding. I know everyone here has been on a sled before. And Suicide Hill out the back here. Several times down the hill, past the bonfire and right into the creek, right? Everybody's done that one. And then there was this one time, Tim Clemens, he's not in here, but I was, like I said earlier, I wasn't that good of a swimmer in those days. And I jumped in the pool. Well, I didn't realize it was over my head. I was used to getting dunked by Debbie. She used to dunk me all the time. I don't know if she remembers that or not, but I'd go to the pool, and I wanted to, but I had to pay that price. And that was when she saw me, she would dunk me all the time. I don't know, what was it about her? I don't know. She just had to dunk me. But anyhow, I jumped in the pool one evening in the deep end. There you go, a lot of love. I jumped in the pool, and it was over my head, and I panicked. I'm taking in water, and Tim Clemens, who later went to the Navy, was a great swimmer, pulled me to the side. And I don't know that I would have drowned or anything, but I sure felt like it was going to happen. And then there was Mr. Huff and his world-famous whistle. You know, he could call you out from just about anywhere. And I don't know if there's anyone in here that could reproduce that, but it sure got your attention. No matter where you were, get over here, you know, you'd hear that whistle and your name was called. And somehow he could he could pick you out from way out there, miles away, you know. He knew who you were. He knew everybody. And then Christmas time, Thanksgiving dinners, all of that. I used to love that time of the year. We would get the $20 at Christmas time for a gift, and then you got the wish book, Christmas wish book. I used to love looking at that thing, you know, and just eyes would gloss over. thinking I was going to take $20 and buy everything in it, you know, but it didn't work out that way. And last but not least, because I could continue to talk about some of these things, I mean, it just, you know, it just bubbles to the surface, was Millie, Mickey, and Betty Owens up at Stepaway Cottage there. I got a chance to move in up there, and I see some heads shaking. Those ladies really took care of us. You know, they treated us like we were royalty. But there are a couple people I would like to thank, you know, for looking after me while I was up here. They really made a mark on my life as an adult, and I constantly think about some of the things that they told me. And the first one was Mr. Huff, and he's not here today. I don't know how he's doing or anything, but we all know Mr. Huff, and he always treated me with respect and dignity, and that goes for everybody. I'm sure there's not a person in here that can say a bad word about the man. But in 1985, I was getting ready to be discharged from the Marine Corps. I'd done my 4 years, and I had like 45 days of leave time. And I was going to go to work for Graham in the Woods program. I needed to get out early, though, to be here in time, and Doug actually worked that summer together. And I needed to get out early enough to be here so we could start getting all the gear together and whatnot. So Mr. Huff said, well, son, what do you need? And I said, well, Mr. Huff, if you could write a letter to the battalion commander, that would help. So he said, I'll take care of that. Well, he wrote this letter. I never did see what was written, but the battalion commander, who was a colonel in the Marine Corps, came to me and said, Corporal Brownley, I just want you to know that gentleman that wrote that letter, Mr. Huff, he must be well respected in that community. He said, I don't know the man, but I know by his writings that you know, people really respect him. So when I got out and I came back, Mr. Huff said to me, he said, son, I was 21, I think I was 22. Son, you got the world by the tail. And he said, but you know, you have to either stand for something or you'll fall for everything. And there was a lot of truth in that, and it really hit home. It makes me, when I go out and I do things, when I get involved, makes me really take a look at what the outcome could be, what the consequences are. And then there's Mr. Halstead. We all know Mr. Halstead, and I talked about him just briefly just a little bit ago, but Mr. Halstead was that fatherly figure to a lot of us. You know, he was fatherly and kind, and I would have to say there's the moral compass of this man has got to be as true as the North Star. I mean, he just always was a shining example, always taking opportunities. Teaching moments is what I call it. He never really got in trouble with him. It was a moment to learn, you know, an opportunity to learn. And, you know, as I said earlier, Evans and I were almost inseparable growing up. And even to this day, the Halstead family has a Christmas meal together, and they never fail. It never fails. They call me and invite me. Sometimes I can't make it, but when I can, I do. And I really appreciate that, Mr. Halstead. And then there's, who could forget, Mr. Graham. Now, this cat here, I had a lot of dealings with him. I'm going to tell you, I had a lot of dealings with him. And like I said earlier, you didn't lie to this guy, so I was over all of that. But he truly loved the kids that he worked with. I believe he did. He had this knack for seeing the best in kids. He could always take the worst of the worst and reach in there and pull out the good stuff. And, you know, that sternness from him is what kept me on track, and his confidence in me is what keeps me going today. He built a confidence in me that gave me the feeling that I could do just about anything I put set my mind to. I could accomplish it. So thanks again, Mr. Graham. Also known as Graham, or among the kids sometimes Red, and I'm sure he knew that. But anyhow, that was Mr. Graham. And then Ron Hunt, who's not here today. I don't think he's here. But the reason I mentioned Ron is Ron gave me my first job when I'll say private sector job, when I got out of the Marine Corps and left the home, you know. He gave me my first private sector job. And what I really admired about Ron, and I'm sure there's just about everybody here can attest to this if you know him, he's a straightforward guy. You know, he pulls no punches when he tells things, when he tells you. And I always admired that about him. He had lots of tact. And his tact was like one of those kind of guys that let's be honest, he could tell you to go to hell and you'd look forward to the journey. It was just the way that he did it. You know, he was that kind of guy, and I think he's still that way today. You know, he's just like that. And then Larry Hicks in the back there. Now Larry, 24 years ago, I left the home. I had worked the Woods program for a few years, and was in need of employment. So I went to what's now, it was Roanoke Valley Cablevision, it's now Cox Communications. And I had this idea that, you know, if I could get my foot in the door down there, I think I could, you know, do something here. But I didn't have any connections. Well, I knew that Larry, he knows just about everybody. Somehow, some way, he knows. And he knew the GM, the general manager out there, Bernie Langheim. And Larry called and said whatever he said, I don't know, but it doesn't really matter because he got me a job there. And I've been there for 24 years. And I just want to say a big thank you to Larry for that. And but I should say, I guess, thank you. I want to say thank you to all the staff, past and present, because the staff of today also has a job, much like the job of the past staff, and that is to guide the youth. So my hat's off to you folks. And in closing, I'd like to say to the kids that live here now, at the Baptist Home, your opportunities at Hope Tree are gifts, just like for all of us that came before you, they're gifts. But it's up to you to reach out and take those gifts and to do something with them.